If you remember the song from Annie Get Your Gun, Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better, I think it's a little bit that way with Enrico Caruso. If we're ever talking about legendary opera singers, if we're ever discussing the best tenors, it seems like Caruso will inevitably top the list. And how come? Well, he was an incredible artist by all accounts on stage, and he also took the gramophone by storm like no one else at that time. Caruso's enduring legacy is unique. He was the first person ever to sell 1 million records, Vesti la giubba specifically. And he did all of that even though he died before making any electrical records. He died in 1921. So before the electrical technology, recordings were made in wax cylinders. And keep in mind as we're listening to this is part of the reason why I'm making this video. The wax cylinder takes a full-blown orchestra and makes it sound like an ice cream truck. That's the level of fidelity loss that you're looking at. That's the level of sound quality loss that happens. A full-blown orchestra sounds like an ice cream truck jingle. And Caruso's voice is this powerful, but probably spinto tenor voice, although, some people will insist that he was essentially a dramatic tenor, and early on in his career that he was more of a lyric tenor. That's ultimately his voice was his voice. There are no major incidents in his career, despite the fact that he smoked and that he probably didn't live the healthiest lifestyle, that drastically changed his voice. He was an incredibly versatile, powerful voice, and a tenor on top of that. So tenors could sing right in that frequency range where the fundamental frequencies were set in the sweet spot of the wax cylinder and what it was capable of preserving, and you could also get some overtones with that. So you could capture enough of the beauty of the voice. And Caruso's breath capacity, his support, his power was so massive that he could really leave an impression, even with such a primitive technology. But with all that being said, it was still difficult for me to get into some of these earlier recordings, and Caruso really was the person that led me to a much, much deeper appreciation of the first recordings that we have of these older opera singers from the beginning of the 20th and really even the very end of the 19th century. With Caruso, it was one very, very specific recording. His February 1st, 1904 recording of Una furtiva lagrima from Donizetti's L'elisir d'amore, the elixir of love. Now, Caruso had already done 2 takes of Una furtiva lagrima that have survived, one in 1902 and one in 1903. And then in 1904, he did it again, in all 3 of these cases with piano accompaniment. He would ultimately go on to record the aria in 1911 with orchestra. Now, my favorite Caruso recordings disproportionately are going to be some of those early records with piano, because I think for whatever reason they captured his voice better. His sound is so intimate and vulnerable and close up, and I don't know, it pierces through some sort of veil that often remains in these early wax records. He gets a step across from it. It's obviously not what it would have been to record him with modern technology, but he captures a little bit of his voice that is often missing in a lot of these early recordings, and that is missing in some of his orchestral recordings that he made later on. I don't know if he was mic'd further back to capture the full scope of the orchestra, exactly what happened. But this 1904 recording with the piano, by this point, having done the aria live quite a bit, having done 2 recordings of it, whatever happened in this session when they did it, as far as I know, on for 2 different 78 RPM sides, where he could draw out the tempo and really do the phrasing the way he wanted to. It's one of the closest recordings to perfection that I've ever heard in musical history. And I don't say that lightly. Neither do I say this lightly, but I think this is definitively the best recording that has been made of this aria, and it's a very, very famous tenor aria. It's a very prominent tenor aria. But a tenor for me does an extraordinary job with this aria if he gets to 85% of what Caruso accomplishes in this 1904 record. Why do I say that? Well, we're going to listen to the aria. We're going to listen to him do it. It'll be largely self-explanatory. But his phrasing, his sense of dynamic control, his legato, his characterization, the beauty of his bass sound, the power of his sound, especially around the passaggio. And you'll hear in this earlier record, he will open F quite a bit. He will also In the climax of the aria, where there's this big crescendo on F natural above middle C, on cielo si può morir, F, and then cielo opens up to a G natural, and that G natural he takes wide open. It's a massive open G. It's not covered. Now, I know that terminology in music is used differently. Some people will insist on saying that's head voice. That's totally fine by me. The point that I'm saying is it's a very, very full, massive, chesty sound that obviously is resonating in the right part of the head. It's very balanced. It's not screamed. It's not strained. On the contrary, it's super open, free, buoyant, powerful, flexible, but also it's not the modified covered vowel. It's wide open. Beautiful, fantastic. And then he has incredible, remarkable flexibility, as you'll hear right at the end of the aria on the big run. And just his dynamic control, his sense of musical instinct. I don't know how to explain it. There's just this recording has that X factor. It has the element. It has the several elements that superimposed on top of each other make for the layers of tremendous, intelligent, stylistically brilliant, expressive, and viscerally exciting singing all at once. It's everything. It touches your gut, it touches your mind, it touches your heart, it touches your soul. Incredible record. So, let's take a listen. I mean, unbelievable. And as I'm re-listening to it, I think part of the key to his success is that he is a very large tenor voice for this particular role. This is a role for a lighter lyric tenor voice. I mean, I know that larger voices can do it, but it's not a dramatic character. Um, and yet Caruso sings most of this aria in a sweet mezzo voce, which is a testament to his technique and his flexibility as an artist to be able to sustain such a beautiful, colorful mezzo voce sound. He's not singing in some weird falsetto. He is not shifting in a sort of unsupported or nasally head voice. He is singing in just a softer mechanism of his fuller, chestier sound for most of the aria. And he has the ability to restrain his voice even up on G, A, and so on. He has total control. But then, at key climactic moments, he'll crescendo from like 3 to 115. And especially here in this phase of his career, you can see how bright and open he keeps his ah and some of the other open vowels right in the passaggio. So those Fs, it's critical. If he covered those Fs, this aria would be a totally different experience. If he covered F natural consistently throughout this aria, it wouldn't have this sense of sheen and sunshine. It would just be strangely dark. But he keeps the vowels so wide and crisp and open, and it's absolutely thrilling, and so it allows him a full breath of crescendo. So if he covered that G, for example, as he does in the 1911 recording, if he covered that G, it would just, the sound couldn't reach the next level of intensity. It would sit at 85%, 90% intensity, something like that. But it couldn't reach 100% in clipping, if that makes sense. It couldn't reach just like an eruption, a volcanic eruption of emotion, passion, beauty, and everything. And he just, I don't know, he got it. He just felt it in this recording, in this session. They did one take of this aria. It was spectacular. It still is. We have it for posterity. This is 1904. Never been surpassed, in my opinion. Never heard anyone do it better. I heard some singers do it really well. I've heard some singers give vocally good renditions, but the fact that this performance sits in the back of my head leaves me, I don't know, a little bit unimpressed. I mean, I enjoy it for what it is, but it's like my eyes have been opened, and I know that this aria could sound like this. I don't know, but just an incredible performance. And the beauty of his voice that is captured in such an early record. One, it helped me to understand why it's worth listening to these early, even wax record recordings, not to mention the electrical recordings that are easier to get into, starting in the mid-1920s that were made starting then. But also how to appreciate the early recordings, and that some of them did actually manage to capture the voices of singers quite faithfully, quite beautifully. So I would highly, highly encourage, if you're an opera lover, that you allow yourself to trail off into some of the earliest recordings that we have. These singers, often even new composers, there's a recording of Caruso singing Leoncavallo's Mattinata, which I'm pretty sure Leoncavallo wrote especially for him, with Leoncavallo playing the piano. So these singers, new composers that we've come to think of as very significant in the operatic art form. Some singers even created the roles for those composers. Some singers founded basically what the Verismo style was like, for example, that was at its peak around the time that recordings first started to be made. So these are very, very significant treasures, both for our enjoyment and also for the history of opera and for musicology, for the understanding of what opera was intended to sound like by the people that developed and perfected some of its later stages. And so whatever your opinion is on shifting styles, on the evolution of the art form, the reality is we need to be historically literate about where it's come from. And we need to not be super quick to assume that what we're doing is better. Let me just put it that way very diplomatically. Now, if you have a very rigorous case for why what opera has come to be today is consistently better than what it used to be, or is better in many, many regards, then I think it would be helpful to lay that out with evidence. But even then, you would have to use the evidence of the old recordings, compare them to new performances, and explain what has improved. But that's a topic for another time. I hope you enjoyed Caruso. I think everything that he left is worth listening to. I think everything is worth studying. I think every great tenor that we've come to admire would absolutely say the same thing. I really haven't heard of a great tenor that talks about past influences that doesn't really mention Caruso. Caruso is that big of a deal. An absolute titan in classical singing, and certainly one of the most preeminent tenors of all time, absolutely since recording began, and very frequently the candidate for number one. I hope you've enjoyed. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, and have a wonderful day.